So let's get the thoughts then of Steve and Ella. Mixed bag of front pages, it has to be said. And where are you choosing to go first?
Well, we thought we would begin with Brexit just for a change, because we probably haven't had that over
We've had weeks off it, I tell you.
the last few months. And it's quite interesting that the papers have got, again, the fact that Theresa May is going to bring back... it's a small thing in the front page of the Telegraph.
It'll get bigger, I'm sure.
It'll get bigger. She's going to bring the deal back for the fourth time. And I'm sort of reminded, reading the themes, they are hugely important, but they are familiar. It reminds me, you know, the TV critic Clive James once reviewed Crossroads, and he said one episode ended...
You're going back a bit now, aren't you?
Well, it was some time ago. He said one episode ended and the guy was washing the car, and he didn't watch for 6 months, and he switched it on, and he just finished washing the car. And you feel a bit like that with Brexit. You know, you could go on holiday and come back. She's bringing back a withdrawal agreement. The talks are continuing between Labour and the Tories. The leadership campaign is up and running with about 95 Tory MPs, deluded enough to think they could be the next Prime Minister at a moment of great historic emergency. And so on it goes. But, you know, you can mock the familiarity, but it is... Each element of it is interconnected with another element, and it's very hard to see the way through.
Mm. And, I mean, the Sun quoting Theresa May here saying that she's arguing that the way through is for both Leavers and Remainers to give ground. And so that's the suggestion that, you know, this is what we've been had with the cross-party talks, that both sides need to come together, not just Labour and Conservative, but Leavers and Remainers, and that there has to be this word, compromise. There has to be a compromise on positions. And the fact is, it's almost impossible to compromise on the referendum decision, because it was a binary choice between leaving the institution or staying within an institution, and you can't have a little bit of either. So if you leave the European Union but not the single market, then you are still within the workings of the European Union. You know, that you cannot have a compromise on this. Actually, the way out of it is either to revoke it and for the government to, you know, it's... I hope they don't do it, but it seems implausible that they do it, because that would be directly anti-democratic, never mind a second referendum. Or you go for a no deal and implement this Brexit vote and see democracy through and deal with whatever comes after it. I find it difficult to believe that either party would like to do either of those options. So the foreseeable future, really, whether Theresa May is here in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 2 years, whatever, is going to be more of the same.
So why for you does her withdrawal agreement, which, to be fair, is only the divorce, it is not the future relationship with the European Union, why does that not deliver on those things that she herself has said she is entirely committed to do, to leave the key institutions? The customs union part is only temporary, as we know. Why doesn't that work for you?
Well, it doesn't work because the temporary nature of the customs union is an important one. Because really in terms of the Brexit deal, both Leavers and Remainers have claimed that this does not satisfy their demands. Anything other than, you know, it gets classified as an extreme view, no deal, because there's been so much fear-mongering around it, because politicians are so utterly afraid of any kind of political change. But the fact is, anything other than a no deal, which is clean, which I like to call a clean Brexit, clean ties, no customs union, no single market, no continuation of EU legislation, just ourselves alone outside of this institution is the only way of realising Brexit.
And no trade deal with the European Union, which is our major trading partner, which is obviously the concern that some people have about it.
The reality is there isn't a majority in this House of Commons for no deal. I mean, we don't know a lot of things about what's going to happen. We do know, because it's been tested, that there's no majority for no deal. And I suspect if she does Theresa May bring her deal back for the fourth time, there won't be a majority this time. I think she will say, look, the European elections show that there is an urgency, that Britain must leave, we shouldn't have been in the European elections. But leadership is partly artistry, and you cast a spell that you are omnipotent. Clearly, that's not her position. She's going to go fairly soon. And when you've got that diminished authority to sell a proposition which has been defeated very heavily so many times, I think becomes even more difficult each time you give it a go. So I don't think that's the way through. There will be a leadership contest at some point. It's not at all clear. That changes very much, because it will be the same House of Commons, the same complex issues. And it's not quite as straightforward, the no deal, as us alone triumphant. It would be, hugely complex to pull off. But anyway, there's no majority for it in the Commons. So
I mean, the problem is,
see many
with
obstacles.
no deal is that eventually you'd want a trade deal, and at that point you still will have to talk about the things that the withdrawal agreement dealt with, which is obviously, you know, EU citizens' rights, paying off whatever they think you owe, and all those elements of it. You still have to end up talking about those bits.
I think that's very true, but the problem is that has become the priority, and the only nature in which this discussion is talked about is in relation to trade, especially in relation to no deal. Well, actually, it's really not to do with that at all. It's actually to do with democracy. It's a statement of intent that you believe in democracy and you believe in it to such an extent that you're willing to give the proverbial 2 fingers to the EU and say, really don't care about dealing with you
At the expense of British
anymore.
business at the end, then, if it's only about democracy and you forget about the other elements that makes the British, you know,
at this point in time,
system work.
At this point in time, no deal is going to have consequences, and that's not the fault of the voters. Let's remember that is the fault of Parliament, of politicians for failing to get this through for 3 years. So no one's, I think, would be mad to say, "Oh, no deal. What's the problem there?" It'd be absolutely fine. There will be consequences, as there always is with political and economic change. But the fact is, voters already said, yeah, we've threatened us with, losing our jobs. You've threatened us with all of this. Don't care. I want this thing. I want political change. Do it. I want to talk about in relation to how.
Take many different forms. I mean, it doesn't have to be this particular imprecise change. And trade deals, there's a thriller to be done about the anatomy of a trade deal because, you know, the UK out of the EU will have to do loads of trade deals, and they will involve agreements with another country. The rules of those agreements would have to be governed by mediators, bureaucrats, not elected. And, you would end up with a sort of 1,000 mini kind of EU-type deals. So there isn't a sort of dream scenario where you're outside negotiating trade deals with a sort of kind of glorious omnipotence.
But that's Manella's saying that's not the point. You know, just do it, sort it out, and then move on from it. I mean, it doesn't matter how difficult it is. That's
you
the
have to prioritise. You know, I'm not a trade expert. I don't ever want to be a trade expert. I really don't find it that interesting. I'm not saying it's important. Not my thing. But I think as the referendum has shown, it's democracy that is the key issue. But in terms of talking about how we're going to get out of this, the Metro story here, and that's across some of the papers on John McDonnell's comments, is interesting, because I think the European elections will be a real change, because it will be a means to send a message. Lots of people, like myself, will be using it as a means to send a message to politicians that things cannot carry on as they are. And it will be, you know, it's going to be completely about Brexit, never mind what any politician tries to tell you about, you know, potholes in the road or this policy, that policy. It is about Brexit, either remain or leave. John McDonnell's come out and said that that Labour, Jeremy Corbyn himself, are remain in their hearts. We talked about that earlier, but I want to pick up on something else that he said. He's described the Brexit Party as a rise of an alt-right politics that could damage our political system for the long term. Just a friendly word of advice for people like John McDonnell: stop talking about Brexit as an alt-right project. It's insulting to their own voters, Labour voters, many of whom are on the left, many of whom have no relationship to alt-right politics. It's also this kind of residual insult that the demand for democracy within Brexit is interlinked with the racism and, you know, fascism light of alt-right politics. It's just nonsense.
But
stop it.
There is a perfectly respectable set of arguments to be made about Brexit, but the Brexit Party, which I know you're going to support, is a kind of chimera, really. I mean, it is a party without any other policies, and it is. I know you would say you are of the left, but Nigel Farage is recognisably rooted. I think he would describe himself as a Thatcherite, and he got annoyed the other day when he was asked about his views on the NHS and the role of the state. But when you are trying to bring together a broad coalition of left and right, these views are highly significant. And that's why, you might disagree with the definition, but the Brexit Party, as currently defined, is totally imprecise about everything except this one
But
issue.
it is a European election, and if it comes to a general election they stand, it's absolutely not certain that I will defend them. And I'm actually, you know, I'm depressed by the fact that the one option I have in this European election, which we shouldn't have been having anyway, is the Brexit Party.
And
yet they have a very clear message on democracy. You cannot say otherwise, that they have one message, and that's to deliver on the democratic demand of Brexit. I mean, who could fault that?
I'm not even sure whether that is entirely clear, because when you analyse what Nigel Farage calls, you probably agree with him on this, a clean break, what does that mean precisely? There will have to be a negotiation with this hugely complex institution from which you are extracting yourself. The option of a clean break in itself is a distortion. There is no clean break Brexit. It will be difficult. And so even on that issue, where, of course, they've got the huge potency of clarity, it's not wholly clear.
Apologies, I need to move on. Anyway, we could talk about Brexit all night, and for the next 3 years as well as the last 3 years.
Probably will be.
I know,
Next 10 years, probably.
No, oh my goodness, not sure about that. Would you eat jellyfish chips or cricket burgers? We'll let you digest that thought after this. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me this evening, Steve Richards and Ella Whelan. Got lots to pack in, so let's crack on with the Daily Mirror. Theatre of cruelty calls for the programme to be axed after the lie test suicide, as the paper says. Where do you stand on this?
I'm conflicted because I both loathe Jeremy Kyle and that means of producing entertainment which just is the kind of base poverty porn that plays on people's insecurities and, you know, makes spectacles of people, and it's horrible, it's degrading. And yet, I think that we should be very careful when we're talking about suicide and the causes of suicide, and when we're looking to kind of scapegoat people. I think that the idea that simply this individual committed suicide simply because of Jeremy Kyle is that kind of dangerous conversation leads into looking at the very narrow view of what causes suicide. We should always be respectful of the fact that there are many different reasons why someone makes the terrible decision to take their own life. That is not to take any of the kind of disgust away from Jeremy Kyle, but I'd be nervous about having this discussion that simply going onto reality TV or whatever kind of genre Jeremy Kyle is would simply cause someone to take their life. I'm just nervous about that. I'm nervous about drawing that line.
I think there's a genre of TV which kind of turns viewers into voyeurs, and it kind of whips up an anger in the audience, whips up an anger amongst the participants. This is a kind of obviously extreme example. I think ITV is right to drop it and look into the whole thing. But it goes wider, I think. There are a lot of TV programmes now where one of the aims is to sort of generate a sense of frenzy, and that includes some political programmes as well, you know, where one of the aims is not to sort of try and make sense of things and shed light, where you can incidentally have a lot of fun and revelatory stuff. It is just to get everyone worked up. But this is obviously an extreme example, and I think does need looking at and stopping.
We've only got 1 minute left. Should we do our last story?
Jellyfish.
Jellyfish chips and
Yeah, he feels hungry.
to eat.
So this is the suggestion that instead of, you know, with the whole discussion about climate change and I need to eat less meat and yada, 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 the idea is that instead of real fish and chips, you would have what is currently available as mashed up banana blossom, but potentially also, if I understand this right, turning jellyfish into chips. So not even having jellyfish as the protein substitute, but turning jellyfish into chips.
It's a bit of a leap, isn't it?
I'm a vegetarian. I don't eat fish.
Would you eat jellyfish chips?
I certainly would not eat jellyfish chips, but I wouldn't eat
What's wrong with
burgers.
potatoes?
Well, and cricket burgers, as in insects, not a cricket bat.
Well,
we need to eat what is readily available, not what we need to domesticate and grow, I suppose.
Well, the end quote from this bit of research
don't eat any of it.
says, even if we end up relying on the patch or pill dinners for our physical health by 2169, food will still play a important role. If we get to a point at which we're having to put patches on to survive food, please, I don't want to be around when that happens, actually.
Yeah, but in
I'll
the
keep my
meantime,
fish and
before you
chips.
get to that point, you two can have jellyfish chips, but
No,
I won't
well,
touch.
well.
I think I'll
We'll
stick with
debate that later.
potatoes, yeah.
Steve Richards, Anna Whelan, lovely to see you both. Thank you very much
you.
indeed.